the question is really before the DC Circuit whether or not the EPA has exceeded its mandate, meaning can the EPA as a regulatory agency engage in potential lawmaking, and is it a violation of what's called federalism, which is you don't allow the states to essentially implement their own laws, take into account the situation in each individual state. So this is still ongoing, and we'll see where this ends up. And with the new administration, we're not really sure what will happen to the Clean Power Plan. Paris Agreement, Mark already discussed that. So I thought I would mention some other areas of climate change that we might have to deal with, and perhaps areas that legislation will be required. One is infection. Studies have indicated that warmer temperatures, we just discussed that, will lead to increased infection agents in the United States and worldwide. There was a study on the effects of El Nino on infectious diseases, showed an increase in vector-borne and like flies, mosquitoes, and enteric gastrointestinal disease in the United States. Treatment for this, however, there's an increase in resistant bacteria, and also a need for vaccines, which have not necessarily been developed to treat diseases in developing countries, such as malaria and dengue. Although Sanofi just announced that last year that there was a dengue vaccine to treat dengue fever. The reason for the drop in antibiotic development has always been it's because it's very difficult to produce antibiotics, which are going to be, again, in the backdrop of the fact that we need new antibiotics to treat antibiotic-resistant diseases. Vulnerability to generics, antibiotics are very episodic. It's just very unpredictable pathway, high risk, few candidates. There was a law that was passed called the GAIN Act, and this actually provided an additional 5 years exclusivity. So when a drug is passed, is approved by the FDA in the United States, the drug company has a period of exclusivity, even if it falls off patent. No one else can compete with it, and the GAIN Act granted an additional 5 years. The FDA needs to determine which pathogens will be which will pose a threat and which pathogens are under this list. And various lists of disease which could spread with climate change would be dengue fever, malaria, etc. I have a list here: West Nile, Zika, of course, was in the news, chikungunya. The FDA will have to address this, and worldwide, this will also have to be addressed in order to produce vaccines and antibiotics which can treat these diseases. In climate change, there will be issues concerning food production. And as I already mentioned, there are issues concerning antibiotic resistance. So the American Academy of Pediatrics has released a report that their practice of adding antibiotics and antimicrobial drugs to healthy livestock has a negative effect on humans, especially children, not just to treat disease, but also to promote growth. So we're looking at the situation where domestic sales and distribution of antimicrobials approved for use in food-producing animals in 2009 to 2014 increased by 22%. In 2013 and 2014 increased by 4%. And this is for both non-medically important and medically important reasons. Many antibiotics are available for OTC, over-the-counter, for farmers, and we could not get them as humans over-the-counter. They would require a prescription. There's also been a recent study that shows that the use of antibiotics may increase methane production among cattle. So we're going to have to address this. Potential solutions might be, greater requirements on prescriptions from veterinarians, with respect to medication, diagnostics to better target diseases. So when animals get diseases, better farming practices. Water rights, again, a very big area for legal work. Increasing scarcity of fresh water will lead to disputes. We hope for technologies such as desalinization, filtration, recovery, reclamation, but these are expensive and technology isn't quite there yet. It's really important to think of what's going on right now in the Western states, prior rights. So if you're a user of water, you get the right to use it, and the folks downstream have to deal with that. In the Eastern states, it's riparian rights. Use is proportional, and you're not supposed to, you're supposed to leave enough for the folks downstream. But a lot of farming goes on in the Western states. You can look to federal law, and federal law says that if you're looking, and this is only between states, but they use a doctrine called equitable apportionment, and they look at a lot of factors: climatic conditions, consumption, established uses, availability, conservation, potential benefit, prior uses not. So I ask whether or not when you look at state use, we're going to have to start looking, instead of prior rights or riparian rights, states are going to have to consider the overall effect in the water and benefit of apportioning water use within a state. This is going to be very important because I don't think technology is going to catch up, and a lot of states subject to drought conditions this year, including my own state, which was Massachusetts, which is subject to drought conditions. So, where are we? I don't think environmental laws are sufficient to address the wide range of effects of climate change. We're going to have to consider new laws, adjustments in laws, not just to address the release of greenhouse gases, but to also address the conditions that may arise with the rise in temperature and with other effects from climate change. That's it.
Great, thank you, John. I've always been the design of the meeting was to go from Mark and Americas and from a high policy level to then talk about what are things that get not in the way, but what are things that really govern the way we operate. And that's why I want John to come along and talk about some of the environmental laws and that affect the things that make what Mark and the UN want to do, but it can't just be done by executive female, it has to be done through a legal system. We're going to switch over a little right now and just take some time to talk about, climate change. We need to talk about how does this affect health, and we've chosen to concentrate on children's health. Because children are the most affected, and again, Mark's video, whatever it was from the health organization, I think it said it very well. I think also just one personal thing is 45 years ago, I don't know, I was in the Navy in the Vietnam War, and I went to an island in Tahiti, or off Tahiti. I got there and said, welcome to this island and welcome to the land of the dengue disease, is that right? I said that? The dengue disease. My wife is sort of English Scottish, so she's got bright red hair and very fair skin. And we got off the plane, she said, I'm going to die here. I said, well, I don't think you said a redhead in the middle of the tropics, with all these mosquitoes, who knows? Well, 45 years later, I have to know she's still alive, and we're still married. But what's interesting to me was, well, there's a linear 45 years ago in the South Pacific is now almost worldwide, and not only in the Caribbean, but in Africa, but also in the United States. So these are things that happen, and unfortunately, the time lag between observing disease states and actually finding cures can be a long time. And that's what we're going to concentrate on the next couple speakers is, what does it take to get a vaccine? What does it take to get new therapies in the marketplace? But before we move on to our experts, one of the things that I did want to do is invite Sarah Graham. Sarah Graham is a student at Quinnipiac University, senior, right? And we actually, Quinnipiac University, and I'll also introduce Professor Katie Place, who is does some programs there. We're still talking about this, and Sarah said, let me tell you about what happens in my world. let's put a human face behind the policies we're talking about. Let's talk about how this really affects individuals. So Sarah was very nice to come forward and just give a short couple, if you will, about how climate change has affected her life in a very short period of time. So Sarah, please, thank you.
Hi, I'm Sarah. So, climate change has a serious impact on chronic illnesses that are already present. I personally live with cystic fibrosis, which is also known as CF. For those who don't know what cystic fibrosis is primarily a lung disease, but it also affects other areas such as the pancreas, liver, and digestive systems. Until recently, I've been like extremely lucky with my disease. I've been very healthy. I've had lung functions around 110 my whole life, with a few minor drops here and there. Lung functions measure the percentage of air capacity your lung is able to withstand. What changes cystic fibrosis is that when climate becomes warmer, it makes it easier for certain bacteria, possibly bacteria, to grow inside the lungs at rapid rates. One in which has been studied is called Pseudomonas, which is very present in lungs with cystic fibrosis. In 1 year, the Pseudomonas size of my lungs has almost tripled, just as my lung functions have dropped 20%. Recently, I was in class and started to cough up a lot of blood, and I was rushed to the hospital where they explained that the Pseudomonas had permanently eradicated one of my bronchial tubes for the blood, as well as bronchitis and pneumonia. I was in the hospital for 2 weeks, received strong IV antibiotics, but unfortunately, it cannot fix the problem. My lungs have permanently been damaged. It is getting near impossible to suppress massive amounts of Pseudomonas. I spend 2 hours every morning in air with clearance to help. I have been battling serious lung pain, high fevers, fatigue, and long coughing fits that are similar to drowning. Climate change has definitely affected my life, but I'm really eager to fight and keep my lungs and others as healthy as possible. And that's
Thanks, Sarah, for really putting the human face behind climate change. And it's a great job, and I really thank you again. I also want to point out the differences in ages. Sarah had her presentation on an iPhone. Everybody else uses big letters and hyperlinks. But thank you, Sarah, again, for sharing that. I'd like to, the next person I'd like to introduce is Dr. Dick Woods. Dick is a MD, but he's also spent many years in the pharmaceutical world. He's also president of a company which has a biomarker for pancreatic cancer. I just asked Dick, who we've known for 8 years, just talk a little bit about, as an MD, what are some of the things that really not getting away, but some of the things that have to be done to get new therapies approved, and especially in children. This is a very difficult thing because it's really hard to do clinical trials on children. So Dick, if you take a couple minutes and kind of talk a little about that, again, his background, which is long and extensive, is in your favor. Thank you.
Thank you. So, young lady that we heard just before us, I think, brings the human face to what we're talking about today. Health problem with climate change. I never thought of that one. And I think I'd like to start with, it's probably important to expect the unexpected in climate change. On a list of 100 diseases, I wouldn't have thought of that. I think healthcare providers generally would feel the same way. So we've heard various infectious diseases that may increase. We're probably also going to see new infectious diseases that we've never occurred before. And throughout my career as a hematologist, I treated hemophilia patients, and I went through the entire episode of the HIV epidemic. And just to give you a real quick story, I had a patient who came to me who said they heard of a new disease that was entering the blood supply and threatening the hemophilia community. And my arrogant response was, I'm a doctor, I know every disease there is, there's no such thing, don't worry. And that sweet young lady died a year later of HIV disease. So we're going to see some new, interesting, and complex diseases that we have to attack. But the good news is, HIV that was 100% fatal at the time, in a reasonably short period of time, is now curable, and many people are living with HIV disease. So we do have solutions for some of these issues that we face. This one slide will pretty much dictate a lot of what we can say about children and developing new drugs. Because when we talk to children, we're really talking about a range, a population of people with very, very different biology, different needs, different diseases. So the young gentleman here with his brother is probably generally going to be pretty healthy with not a major group of diseases at his age, and will almost be treated like an adult. In a neonatal intensive care unit, very, very vulnerable, with lots of difficulties developing medication for them. The young children, the young babies, they're a separate category. So if we're talking about developing medications in children with a variety of ages, with a variety of biologies, with a variety of diseases, we're really talking about potentially a group of maybe 7 subgroups, 2 or 3 years apart in age. And just to go back, let's not forget, well, in the one case, the mother that was shown there, we have to be very, very careful of drugs that are given to women in a pregnancy, because certainly we have, can have a major, major impact on the infant during the development stage, and many, many drugs along the way prior to more recent times have caused some huge defects in infants. So what are some of the challenges in children? We mentioned them, the variety of different ages, and different ages are going to get different diseases. The teenager, actually one of the biggest threats in the country, whether you want to call it a disease or not, drug addiction. He's going to enter the late teenage, young adult population where drug addiction is probably one of the largest killers. Is that a disease or a lifestyle? I'm going to vote for it. In some cases, drug addiction may be a disease, and we need drugs to treat that. In pediatric trials, getting young children on the trial is difficult. We have to have a certain number of patients in a clinical research trial to determine whether a medication is effective, whether it's safe. And only a small number of patients, even in adults, go on clinical trials. In my world, clinical oncology, about 4% of adults ever enter an oncology clinical trial. Children, it's less. In children, the parent has to take time off to get them to the clinical research center, which may be once, twice a week, over months. And in a working parent, that really isn't possible. A lot of ethical issues involved in children. Who really consents to the child? Obviously the parents, but that raises another level of difficulty. And then at a certain age, the child should be involved in consenting to their treatment. What that age is, certainly when they get into their teenage years, they have to have a say in their treatment, although legally the parent will be the one who signs the consent form. Formulations for drugs in children can be very different than adults. We all can take pills. Many children, and I was surprising talking to some of my pediatrician friends, can't swallow pills. Even 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old, they still like liquid medicines. Liquid medicines have to taste good. They have to be absorbed. The simple issue of taking a medicine that we sort of take for granted takes huge amounts of research dollars and research times to make sure that it gets to the right place. So just the fact that you take a medication, does that mean it's absorbed across the GI tract? Is it absorbed in all patients at all ages? Does it get to its primary target? In the oncology world for cancer, it's got to get inside the cancer cell. If it doesn't get in the cancer cell, it does absolutely no good. So lots and lots of issues, and there are issues for adults, but they're generally magnified for children. The next button here. So we talked about absorption, metabolism. Metabolism is huge in children. Metabolism tells us drugs, once you take them, they get broken down. They just don't, they go and do what they're supposed to do, then something has to happen to them. So they have to get destroyed and excreted from the body. So they can be excreted through the liver and the bile, they can be excreted through the kidney. But how we all metabolize drugs may be different from person to person, and certainly from young patients to adult patients. So if you and I break a drug down in the liver and get rid of it, have no toxicity, a young child, a little 7-year-old, with maybe a normal, healthy liver, may not metabolize that drug in the same way. A lot of diseases currently occur in adults, and the clinical research studies are done in adults. And then in the past, it's always been that, well, we're not going to do the trials in children because we make more money doing trials in adults, or that's the larger population. Trials are expensive, so you can't really blame necessarily the pharmaceutical company, but the first target is the large adult population. In the past has been the pediatric population. You make a guess. You take the adult dose, you measure your patient, but you haven't really had the research, so you're really putting the burden on the pediatrician who sees the child to guess the dose that the child should receive. And unfortunately, reasonable laws, and we'll go through that in just a second, have changed to really improve that a lot and force companies, biotech, pharmaceutical companies, to do pediatric clinical trials and come up with information for pediatricians on how to give the drug and what dose to give the drug. So this is generally drug discovery. This may be, to many, one of the most important slides here. This is adult drug discovery. It can be the same for children. It makes no difference. It's basically the time and money it takes to develop the drug. It's a very long process. Unfortunately, it's a very necessary process. We may be able to squeeze that a bit, but if we don't go through this process, we're going to have a lot of drugs in the market that aren't safe. So the whole Hippocratic oath, what we all practice as physicians, is first do no harm, and that comes from thousands of years ago, and that's certainly true today. And so in drug development, sort of caveat number one is drug safety. So if we've got to develop drugs which are used maybe by millions of people, that are safe and not going to cause harm. We go through this period of clinical research trials, and in a pharmaceutical company, we consider this their sort of program. First of all, it takes about $1 billion to develop a drug, and maybe $1 billion to market it. And in the drug discovery phase, you might start with 10,000 compounds, and you keep diluting that and dropping compounds out until you get to one that goes to clinical trials. You see, if you start at 5 to 10,000, you only end up with 5 that are under clinical research. And you've already spent 5 years. This is the area that I'm most involved in. You've spent 5, 6, or 7 years in clinical research. Does the drug work? Sometimes you scrap $500 million, $500 million, because no, it doesn't work, or we found a safety problem, and then you get the drug to market. So lots of impediments to new drug development. There are some regulatory issues. I'm going to pass over these real quickly. Acts recently in the United States and in the EU to force pharmaceutical companies to also evaluate their drugs in children and first in adults. And so just the takeaway here is previously, before this became law, more than 80% of drugs approved for adults were being used in children without safety information. And now it's improved, so the number's been reduced to 50%. Obviously, there's room for more improvement. Just want to mention rare diseases. So I was going to put up a list of rare diseases. Then I looked at there was thousands.